It's trouble for a lot of tournament players.
Yeah,
They play tournaments,
exactly.
they feel comfortable, then they play cash and they just donk it off.
Well, okay, there's two things. One is like what players struggle with generally in cash games, and then a second thing is what tournaments players don't adapt to correctly in cash games. So let's focus on the tournament one because that was kind of the question that's
Okay.
probably most practical and most interesting to a lot of the viewers, especially because a lot of people play tournaments or prefer tournaments because of the competition or the glory, whatever it is, and then they go to cash games, and it's a totally different animal. Well, mainly in tournaments, if you think about how strategically it works, tournaments are a game where you play 80% or 90% of your tournament with less chips than you do in cash games. So your average stack in a tournament, especially unless you play like big premier events where the average stack is like 50 big blinds throughout the tournament, most of the time the average stack in a tournament is like 20 big blinds or 30 big blinds. And so, you're not really forced to make any big decisions if you think about it. The decision might be big in the sense that it's for your whole tournament life, but your stack to pot ratio is really small. So it's an easy decision because of the fact that you're not ever making a big river check raise decision because you never get that far in the hand because usually you're all in pre-flop or you're all in on the flop. It's never like you play a 3-street game and you never get to the point where you're threatened by a 3-bet pre-flop because it might cost you your whole stack on the flop, turn, and river. It's just going to cost you your whole stack in that moment. So it's not like the same game at all. And if you think about, from a strategic standpoint, what you're supposed to do in a tournament is you're supposed to preserve your chips over pursue your equity. And that's simple math because in a tournament, having a chip in a chair is more important than having more chips because your chair is actually worth something,
right?
Especially if you're in the money. So from a strategic standpoint, it's much better to preserve the chips you have, which causes people to play passive. If you notice some of the playing style of tournament players in cash games, they'll limp in, they will be a little passive, and they'll just kind of like try and flop hands, and they don't really apply pressure in spots where it would be prudent to do so. In cash games, your goal is you're playing with deeper stacks. When you play with deeper stacks, you have more decision-making ability. When you have more decisions, there's more skill involved.
And you got to push the edges more.
Yeah, that just makes more sense. Because there's more decisions, there's more skill involved. Because you're playing deeper stack poker, you're going to make bigger decisions on every single street. There's more room for better players to maneuver around the table, right? It's not like in a tournament where you're all in on the flop, you have to just like have a hand. You can't really, float people or outplay them as much. So there's that aspect. And in cash games, like you said, your goal is to maximize expectations. So you have to push tiny edges